Hi there! Now I don't know about you, but I've not made chainmail in ages. So I thought today we could make this 4 Winds chainmail bracelet. So let's get mailing. If you're new to chainmail, it refers to a design made up of jump rings. And the success of any chainmail design depends on the aspect ratio of those jump rings. Now for 4 Winds we need 2 sizes of jump ring with aspect ratios of around 3.1 and 5. Now this aspect ratio is the internal diameter of the jump ring divided by the wire diameter. And for this we need to work in millimetres, so the wire diameter is the millimetres diameter rather than the wire gauge. I'll put a link to the blog post I did on this a while back in the card above and the description below. Now we know the aspect ratio that we're looking for, this 3.1 and 5, and we also know the wire diameter that we're making the jump rings out of, but what we want to find out is the internal diameter we need to make. We can rearrange this equation to show that the aspect ratio times the wire diameter equals the internal diameter. So for our small jump rings, this is 3.1 times 1.25, which is the diameter of the wire I'm going to use, which comes out as 3.875 millimetres. And for the larger jump rings, that's 5 times 1.25, we need to use the same wire, which equals 6.25 millimetres. And this internal diameter is also the diameter of the mandrels that we need to make the jump rings on. Now I'm rounding these out to the mandrels that I've got, so I'll be using jump rings with an internal diameter of 4.1 millimetres and 6 millimetres. So first I'm going to quickly make some jump rings. And if you want to know more about making your own jump rings, I've got a video on that I'll link in the card above and in the description below. So the materials we're using are the jump rings I've just made, which are 4.1 millimetres and 6 millimetres internal diameter, and a small extra piece of the 1.25 millimetre diameter wire, which is 16 gauge, for the clasp. Now in order to make 4 Winds chainmail, we need to start with another weave called Cloudy Skies, and this starts with a chain of 4 of the small jump rings. So we'll open one of the jump rings up, add 2 closed jump rings, which gives us a chain of 3. Then we can add that 4th jump ring to the end. And then we need to position it so the 1st and 3rd jump rings are kind of facing upwards, and the 2nd and 4th face downwards, as shown in this close-up. Then we're going to carefully flip the 1st jump ring over so it sits below the 2nd, and the 4th jump ring up so it sits above the 3rd. Now as you can see, the 2 jump rings on the lower right are facing the same direction and form a pair, and the 2 on the upper left also form a pair. Now it's these pairs that we now need to put a jump ring around just where they cross over each other. So I'm just going to gently lift this up onto my finger so I've got access to those jump rings. Make sure it's in the same configuration, and then carefully put a new jump ring down through one of those rings and up through the other in its pair. I'll try and keep this configuration so you can see exactly where that is. And then we can close that new jump ring up. Then if I turn this around, we can see that's the new jump ring, and we need to put another one through this pair. So exactly as we've just done, we'll put that jump ring down through one ring in that pair and up through the other, and then close it up. And if we just nudge those two new rings into the centre, that gives us our first cloudy skies link. This is how it looks in the same orientation as we've done previously. Then we just need to make several more of these units in the exact same way. And if we wanted to make a cloudy skies chain, we could just link these together with those end jump rings. So we'll take one unit, carefully open up that jump ring on the end, hook it through the next one, and then close it back up again. Then do the same for the next link. And so on to create our chain. So this is Cloudy Skies chainmail. But we're looking to make Four Winds chainmail, so we just need to backtrack to where we had those single units of the Cloudy Skies. I've got two of them here. And to progress onto Four Winds, we need to first flip these over. I'm just going to turn this one. And from the underside we can see the two jump rings we added last are pointed outwards. So we just want to push those so they're pointing towards the centre. This squares off that shape a bit and creates the Four Winds link. Now in order to connect them up we just need to rotate that slightly. And at this point we want to add one of the larger jump rings. And we want to take that through that ring on the lower right, the top linking ring, and the other ring on that right hand side. So if I just use a piece of thin wire to show you the track that that's going to go through, it's coming up from under that first ring, through the middle ring, and then back down that third ring. So it'll sit about there. Now the one thing I've noticed putting these together is that other centre ring likes to get in the way a bit, so you just need to make sure to avoid that. So we'll put that larger jump ring up through that first ring, through that centre ring and down through the third. And then we can close that larger jump ring up. Then we just need to turn the link round and do exactly the same the other side. So we're taking that large jump ring up, through that centre ring, and down through the third. Then we can close that jump ring up. And that's our first Four Winds link complete. And hopefully the close-up gives you a better picture of exactly where those large links are going. Now in order to make the chain, I'd recommend making your links to the Cloudy Skies stage first, then turning them over, pushing those middle jump rings in, and rotating them all so they're in the right orientation for chaining together. And then we're adding the large jump ring to the second side of one unit. And then threading it through the first side of the next unit. before closing it back up again. And we'll keep adding those large jump rings to create the chain. Now I just need to continue making those units to create the length of chain I want. And one useful tip whilst adding those 2 jump rings to the original 4 is to add that first jump ring, and then when you take your hand away in order to close the jump ring, just watch exactly where that spare ring falls and which direction it rotates in. Then once we've closed that jump ring, we know how to manoeuvre that hanging jump ring back to where it was previously. Then we can add the jump ring the other side. Now this chainmail weave can be a bit tricky at first, keeping those jump rings in the correct orientation and knowing exactly where you're threading the jump rings through. But don't worry, you'll soon get the hang of it after you've made just a few links. So my chain now measures 7 inches, which is about 18 centimetres, which will be fine for a bracelet once I add the clasp. And to make that length with these jump rings, I've created 15 of those units, so I've used 90 of the small jump rings and 16 large jump rings. And in order to turn this into a bracelet, we can make a simple hook clasp by creating a loop on the end of a small piece of wire, curving the wire round to make a hook shape, and then making a loop in the other end. And I've created this loop about the same size as the small jump rings. Then we can hammer that hook just to give it a bit of extra strength. And if you want to know more about making hook clasps, have a look at the video in the card above and in the description below. So on one end of the bracelet, we can add an extra one of those small jump rings. And then add the clasp to the other end. And that'll be nice and secure when worn. And that's our bracelet finished. So that's the 4 Winds design. And if you want to see more chainmail tutorials, check out this playlist. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.